Oh, it's you. Hey, didn't see you there. Hey, do you know about Texas, the Lone Star State? Yeah! One of the several U.S. states the size of entire countries, home to 30 million people. See, everything is bigger in Texas. The guns, the freeways, the people. But you know what's not bigger in Texas? Their power grid. Yeah, so good old Texie here has its very own special little interconnection that is strategically placed inside state lines so as to avoid the dreaded, infamous feds. Ooh, scary. What are they gonna do? Force us to winterize our power supplies? Regulate the market? Dare I say, even make our electricity cheaper? Yes, I said that right. The Texas power market is deregulated ever since 1995. The system as a whole is a gigantic anarcho-capitalist mess. So you have power generation companies that make the power. Then you have transmission utilities, companies that transit the power from plants to consumers. But see, neither of these two actually sell the electricity to normal people. No. The power is sold to consumers through a third kind of company known as retail electricity providers, who purchase the bulk power and then sell it at whatever rates they offer to people in an area. So the idea of competition is twofold. Power generators compete to sell their electricity to the retailers, who compete to sell the electricity to the customers. And all of this is overseen by the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT, who are then overseen by the state's Public Utility Commission of Texas, or PUC. In no way, shape, or form is the evil federal government and Bo Biden,
ladies and gentlemen, President Putin,
able to have any jurisdiction over it. And you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack. And you may find yourself in another part of the world. And you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile. And you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. And you may ask yourself, well, why the fuck is Texas like this? Unfortunately, the ideas of economic freedom, endless competition, and profiteering has entered the minds of Texas lawmakers so thoroughly that they even applied it to the most vital part of their state's infrastructure. Ever since the state's conception, it's had this endless independence streak, which is, fine and dandy for small stuff, but not for what powers its entire economic backbone, which also heavily relies on other states and the country of Mexico. Texans have the 5th highest cost of power in the country and also has the highest energy consumption in the country, meaning that the electricity business is a giant lucrative industry, and all electricity is, as I said, coordinated by ERCOT, which of course is a non-profit charitable organization. And don't worry, they've been very charitable. So in 2011, a large groundhog-shaped storm ravaged much of Texas, freezing tons of stuff vital to their power infrastructure, like gas pipes and generators, and took out power for millions of Texans. The two big boys of the country's electrical market, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, and the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, both told ERCOT and PUC to fix their shit in case of a future winter storm. Preparations for cold weather, aka winterization. But see, that would cost money. FERC and NERC could go ahead and FERC themselves as far as Texas could care. And besides, that storm was just a freak occurrence. There ain't no way another larger storm would ever happen in Texas again. Like, come on, it's Texas, right in the border with Mexico. It's always hot, dummy, stupid, idiot. We're fine. So in 2021, the country froze over. Winter Storm Uri, it was called, and Texas was hit by not one but several smaller winter storms from multiple directions, with no winterization of their power infrastructure, causing the main power source, natural gas, to have its supply fall 85%, alongside reductions in all other power sources. Texas already had a tight margin for energy production and never had the resources actually needed to meet their yearly peaks, unlike the rest of the country, and that's in ideal conditions. And then you have Greg Abbott, the homeless slayer, strategos of the Themata of Texas, who's appointed stooges that PUC acts both internal and external oversight entities the year prior. So when these storms hit and power demand peaked, ERCOT had to initiate rolling blackouts, a method of preventing overall infrastructure damage by stopping electrical supply to different areas. Not doing so would make a real blackout way worse. These led to millions of people without power for as long as 3 days in freezing weather. The wholesale electric price was artificially capped by ERCOT, Huck, and Abbott himself at $9,000 per megawatt hour, as opposed to the non-crisis normal $25 per megawatt hour, meaning that during the storm, people who did get power woke up to insane charges for their electrical use. Natural gas utilities paid up to 300 times the normal price for their gas supply, while their expenses were eventually bailed out by the state issuing billions of dollars in bonds. The price of those would go on to the endpoint customers, though. In a bit of horrid foolishness, BP CEO Bernard Looney stated, "It was a very exceptional quarter in gas trading," and Comstock Resources president Roland Burns said it was like hitting the jackpot. Whew. Guys, I'm a bit famished. I'm gonna hit up the local gas station, buy some stale hot dogs, and chips covered in Red 40. According to Google Maps, the closest one is all the way in Austin, Texas. Shit. Okay, be back in a moment. How much? 99 cents. This and the power. Y'all getting any snow up your way? What way would that be? I seen you was from YouTube. What business is it of yours where I'm from? Friendo? I didn't mean nothing by it. Didn't mean nothing. I was just passing the time. If you don't want to accept that, I don't know what else I can do for you. Well, will there be something else? I don't know. Will there? Is something wrong? With what? With anything? Is that what you're asking me? Is there something wrong with anything? Will there be anything else? You already asked me that. Well, I need to see about blacking out. See about blackout? Yes, sir. What time do you black out? Now. We black out now. And now is not time. What time do you black out? Generally when it's cold. It's cold. You do not know what you're talking about, do you? Sir? I said, you do not know what you're talking about. When did you winterize? Sir? You're a bit deaf, aren't you? I said, when did you winterize? Well, somewhere around 2011. I'd say around 2011. Did you black out then? We did then, yes, when it was cold. You said that. Well, I got the blackout now. You live out in that building out back? Yes, I do. You've lived there your whole life? This was my father's place originally. You were born into it? We had the interconnected system for years. Raised the state with it in Texas. We came out here about 54 years ago. You were born into it. If that's the way you want to put it. I don't have some way to put it. That's the way it is. What's the most you've ever lost on a coin toss? Sir? The most you ever lost on a coin toss? I don't know. I couldn't say. Call it. Call it? Yes. For what? Just call it. Well, we need to know what we're calling for here. You need to call it. I can't call it for you. It wouldn't be fair. I didn't put nothing up. Yes, you did. You've been putting it up your whole life. You just didn't know it. You know what date is on this phone? No? 2018. It's been traveling 6 years to get here. And now it's here. And it's either heads or tails. You have to say, call it. Well, look, I need to know what I stand to win. Everything. How's that? You stand to win everything. Call it. All right. Heads then. Well done. Don't put it in your pocket. Sir? Don't put it in your pocket. It's your lucky phone. Where do you want me to put it? Anywhere not in your pocket, or it'll get mixed in with the others and become just a phone. Which it is. The whole disaster ended with 246 dead, with some estimates reaching as high as 702. And you have to understand what losing power like this can really do to people. Closed or empty grocery stores, hypothermia, monoxide poisoning from finding alternate sources of heat, $200 billion in just damage to the entire state. Urban Texans didn't deal with heavy snowfall that often, and most homes were not insulated for freezing weather. Another embarrassing aspect was the actions of some Texas leaders, like Mayor and Warhammer 40k character Tim Boyd, who said such delightful things as, "The city and county, along with power providers or any other service, owes you nothing, and only the strong will survive and the weak will perish." Former Texas governor and 2-year Secretary of Energy Rick Perry stated Texans would be without electricity for longer than 3 days to keep the federal government out of their business, a thing I bet every single freezing Texan would have totally agreed with at the time. And finally, the whole fiasco of Senator and Zodiac killer lookalike Ted Cruz, who fled with his family to a resort in Cancun, Mexico. Cruz tried defending himself when he flew over there, saying he was only going to be there to say goodbye to his family, then he's gonna fly all the way back to Texas. You know, because you can't say goodbye to your family at an airport in America. No, you have to do it at the resort you fly to. And of course, right before he flew back, he was, interviewed wearing a nice, cool, short sleeve polo shirt. Apparently there was like tons of text messages between his wife and their friends, all planning to go to the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun, where it was a nice 80 degrees Fahrenheit, to wait out the winter storm while the pores froze to death. Cruz would later go on to say he regretted the decision and said it was awful how the lack of regulation led to the power outages, even though he had always been a giant advocate for power grid deregulation previously. Abbott also went nuts, blaming large numbers of wind farms in Texas for the power outage. Meanwhile, wind power only accounted for 23% of Texas's energy supply, performed remarkably well under their conditions, and there was a larger percentage of fossil fuel plants that went down as compared to wind power plants. In the aftermath, 5 ERCOT members resigned. Of course, all 5 didn't actually live in Texas, no, and one even lived in Canada, and ERCOT's board fired its CEO. Huck had its Abbott-appointed chairwoman resign. Abbott chose a new guy named DeAndrea. But then 6 days later, he was recorded telling energy investors that their profits would stay protected, so he had to resign too. The Texas legislature would go on to pass a bare-bones bill that only winterized some facilities and put more political stooges in ERCOT, but certain measures like requiring winterization for consumer infrastructure and backup power generation in hospitals and water facilities was cut. But according to Abbott, everything that needed to be done was done to fix the power grid in Texas. And now we have today, where millions of Texans were without power again in the hottest time of the year due to Hurricane Beryl, with experts saying that Texas's grid needs to be updated for future weather events like Beryl and Uri. And again, we have Texas politicians claiming that it's a question of funding. And maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe the second biggest state in the US shouldn't cheap out on having electricity just so it can fuel a giant industry and profit off its citizens. Maybe Texas shouldn't operate its own deregulated grid and have more interconnects with the other states. See, they probably made the right call at the moment. Dropping the grid with rolling blackouts definitely prevented a real blackout that would have lasted way longer. But Texas here demonstrates how we shouldn't maximize individual and corporate profits in a vital industry, have plenty of clear warnings how south it would go due to unplanned events like the weather, and then do this whole 4-month period of telling everyone, it's alright, we fixed it, it'll never happen again, without actually fixing anything. The same sort of thing happened at the start of COVID, when grocery stores and supermarkets started running out of supplies and food, since they operated with a just-in-time supply chain that never anticipated halts and shortages. Except this isn't, can I get my pizza rolls and toilet paper? It's, can I heat my house and not freeze to death? What can Texans do? If they can afford to buy supplies and tools in the spring and fall to wait out further awful weather events, put pressure on their local and state governments to, do anything about this, and work with local organizations and neighbors and communities during these weather events to support each other, which they did very well during Winter Storm Uri. And never let the ghouls in charge tell you they've ever done everything.